I know she's still young, though.
No, not now.
It's the Opperman
I think my dad's
Report.
like 77.
Join digital forensic investigator and PI Ed Opperman for an in-depth discussion of conspiracy theories, strategy of New World Order resistance, high-profile court cases in the news, and interviews with expert guests and authors on these topics and more. It's the Opperman Report. And now, here is investigator Ed Opperman.
Okay, welcome to the Opperman Report. I'm your host, private investigator Ed Opperman, and this show is brought to you by Subash Technosis. You go to subashtechnosis.com if you need any kind of website design, search engine optimization, data entry, press releases written and submitted for you, all kinds of stuff, digital marketing. SubashTechnosis.com. If you get a hold of SubashTechnosis.com, tell them Ed Opperman sent you. I've known Subash for 10 years, and that's how you get a good deal. SubashTechnosis.com. Okay, here we are. Hey, guess what we're doing today? Today is a 10/26/17, so that's October 26th. And today is a day, after 25 long years or so, the CIA is releasing their documents, all their sealed documents on the JFK assassination. So in honor of that, we have Judyth Vary Baker, who's out with a brand new book, Kennedy and Oswald, The Big Picture. It's coming out, should be out in the next week or two. But, you know, her familiar book she's had is Me and Lee, and also David Ferry, Mafia Pilot. And you can catch her at the JFKDallasConference.com, November 17th, 18th, and 19th. I believe that's in New Orleans. Judith, it's in New Orleans,
Dallas.
Right? Dallas.
It's
Dallas.
JFK. Yeah, you can reach it by JFKDallasConference.com.
Judith, tell us about yourself. Who is Judyth Vary Baker?
Oh, my. I should have been, I was headed to be a cancer researcher. I had given mice cancer in only 7 days, something they hadn't done in the big labs. I had many contacts, even with Nobel Prize winners. And I was brought to New Orleans thinking I was going to be able to continue such an operation. It seems that Dr. Alt Knox, who invited me, had other reasons to bring me there. I'd been trained. I knew special things about cancer that other researchers didn't. For example, I worked with Dr. George Moore in his private laboratory at Roswell Park Institute, and they came out with the RPMI 1640 formula a few years later that could grow cancer better than anything. In the newspapers, I was described as having been assigned to make cancers more deadly. I was told that this was an important assignment because by seeing if we could grow them faster and more vigorously, that we might be able to figure out how to kill them. I was so fooled. I was really being brought into a project that was sponsored behind the scenes by the CIA and by rich Texas oilmen and others who wanted to get rid of Castro. And Dr. Alt Knoxner convinced them that he could be able to create a biological weapon using cancer, vigorous cancer. And here I was being trained to work with that. And I brought the formula with me. And because of a series of circumstances, I ended up on the secret side of it. And because it was about an effort to kill Castro, and that was the height of the Cold War, and we hated Castro. He aimed his nuclear weapons right at me and my family in Florida. My friends were anti-Castro Cubans. I even had dated Castro's finance minister's son, Tony Lopez Frisquet. I knew all about it. And I knew so much that when I arrived in New Orleans and I was alone because I came 2 weeks early, the people who got involved with me thought I was on the secret side of it.
Well, clarify for me for a second.
Yeah.
What year was this and how old were you?
This was 1963. I was 19 years old. And they came early, and because of that, the YWCA did not have a room for me like they were supposed to. I had to use my own limited funds until my doctors came back. They were in South America. So while I'm waiting, I had to move in with the cheapest room at the YWCA, which had 2 strippers, a Playboy bunny trainee, and a real tough waitress. And well, we ended up falling in love. That's what happened.
Well, but at 19 years old, you already had some kind of medical training that you could do this kind of research?
Absolutely, sir. Yes. After all, it's all in the newspapers. I mean, what I had learned while I was at Roswell Institute, for example, I learned how to handle the that's a simian virus, SV40 monkey virus under Dr. T. Grace. And also I worked with radiobiology and was adept at handling mutations. I could understand exactly what was going on. I brought with me that formula. So, to New Orleans. And Dr. Oxner had been mentoring me that whole time.
But you had no kind of a contact with the CIA prior to arriving in New Orleans?
Well, not quite that way. At the end, I also went when I was 15. I invented a new way to get magnesium out of seawater, and I ended up claiming the highest prize in Florida in physical sciences, and was sent to the International Science Fair. I met plenty of CIA there. They're always interested in all those people. And I had brought my cancer research materials with me, even though that was a different subject, besides magnesium from the sea, and ended up getting a lot of interest. So I was in contact with Walter Reed. Dr. David Jacobus at the time sent me all kinds of esoteric and interesting chemicals to work with. I was working with mice with under hypothermia, because when cancer is cold, it doesn't grow as quickly, etc. So anyway, I've been involved with contacts with the CIA through two doctors in Bradenton, Florida, who had been trained at Oak Ridge. And I have all the documents for that. And you'll see that at the same time, they were training CIA doctors who were in the same program. So, the CIA knew about me all right from 1960 on. And
you went to New Orleans from Florida?
Yeah, well, I was in Florida, and I also worked briefly at St. Francis, now St. Francis University, worked with Eli Lilly at their labs in Fort Wayne, Indiana, and at a hospital there. And I was working on melanoma. You'll see that Dr. Oxner in all his printed papers that he had written, that he was working on melanoma. At first, they were going to use melanoma to try to kill Castro, but how do you do that? Castro was smoking cigars. You understand that they had tried many other means to try to kill Castro. For example, in the biological area, they had a diving suit that was full of botulism. It would have killed him, But who's going to give him the diving suit? Now, it's true that Castro had plenty of doctors who he trusted. But here's the thing. A doctor asks for penicillin, and a technician will give him a vial of penicillin. But who is the technician? A doctor may say, we need x-rays. Who turns on the x-ray machine? Not the doctor, the technician. So there were infiltrations there of medical people who were anxious to kill Castro. And so those are some of the backgrounds. Dr. Oxner had trained doctors for decades that came from Cuba. And now they were all cut off. Some of them were very angry. They could no longer get training in the United States from somebody prestigious like Dr. Oxner. They were sent to the USSR and given what they considered inferior training. And then they were brought back. They couldn't become rich like they were before because Castro had salaries for them, and he sent them out to take care of the peasants. So you have, in one case, we know a plastic surgeon who thought he was going to be working on Hollywood actors and everything through his connections with Oxner. He ended up working on sugarcane workers' noses and fixing people's lips and so on, So you had people who were anxious to change things back to the way they were, and they were in the medical field. So Oxner had those contacts, and we believed that we were doing the world a great favor if we could get rid of Castro.
Yeah, I'm Cuban. I'm Cuban myself, so my family left Cuba in '59. Now,
well, then you know how angry.
I know. I know. I know. I got uncles still got blood on their hands. No, but now you were dating anti-Castro Cubans around the ages.
Well, for example, Tony Lopez Frisquet. I mean, gosh, he was so brave. He hated Castro. His mom was American, even though his father, Rufo, his name is, Rufo, was on the pesos, the bills there that, I don't think they were pesos. But anyway, eventually it comes out that Rufo Lopez Risquet had CIA ties too. So I also knew a spy. So it's interesting that when Lee met me and was sent, to help kind of keep an eye on me till the doctors could get back, that I knew people and spies. I knew about what tradecraft. I mean, most people don't know what the word tradecraft means, like you do probably.
Well, so Lee was inserted into your life, you believe, by the CIA?
Yeah, well, Lee was the perfect example of what the CIA was up to. This is a man who, his father died, of course, when he was young. The person that he thought of as his dad, basically, was Charles Miret, or Deuce Miret, and he was mafia. He was Carlos Marcello's bookkeeper. He'd been an enforcer for Marcello. And Lee's mother, Marguerite, when he was a teenager, was dating Carlos Marcello's driver, Sam Termini. So, I mean, Lee had all these contacts, and that's just what the CIA wanted. They wanted somebody in the CIA they could trust who also had contacts, you see, with the mafia. So Lee really fit that bill. Lee was extremely trusted to an extent. For example, I'm going to make this, I've made this, you'll like what I'm going to say.
Okay.
Lee Oswald was sent to the USSR as a fake defector. Now, we can prove that in so many ways. This is why I idolized him when I met him. When I met him at the post office, I could not see a ring on his left hand, so I thought I was disappointed because my fiancé hadn't written and I wasn't married yet. Here's this nice-looking guy behind me, standing behind me. So when I dropped a newspaper that had an ad in the paper, it said, Jario, nice here. I had to put a code there because my husband-to-be didn't want his parents to know that we were planning to elope in New Orleans because they were anti-Catholic. They didn't like my Hungarian family. So I had this code, and I was carrying it around, and I also had a letter that I was going to. So as I tried to pass this letter up onto the counter there at General Delivery, I dropped the newspaper. He picked it up. And I thought, he's a nice-looking guy. He's not married. So I thought, I'm not married yet. I'm angry at my fiancé for not writing. So when he picked up the newspaper, I thought I'd do a groundbreaker. I said, Karashat Tavarish, like that. Russian for like, well done, comrade, as he handed me the paper. Oh, my gosh, he answered me in Russian. He replied, it's not wise to speak Russian in New Orleans. I was flabbergasted. I mean, then soon I noticed he had his ring on his right hand, not his left hand, a wedding ring, just like my grandma from Hungary. And so then I knew that he had to have come and married someone in the Soviet bloc or the Soviet Union, So I asked him, and he said, yes, he was married to a Russian woman. I can't tell you how I felt when he told me that he had just returned the year before from the USSR after being there 30 months. 30 months. Now, I'm going to make you an example. I've told this to somebody else today, but it's important for everyone to understand. If today you met a man who had been in the North Korea for 30 months, who had put in the newspapers he was renouncing his citizenship, that he was going to tell all the secrets he knew because he knew about how the missiles were, so the North Koreans could shoot down missiles. And then you meet him on the streets 30 months later, okay? He's back in the United States walking around a free man. Do you think that would be possible? Not on your life. And here is this man walking around a free man after he had done the same thing, denounced the United States, said he renounced his citizenship, but he never signed any papers. And he came back on a State Department loan. And now we're being told, he's telling me that he was in the Soviet Union for 30 months under those circumstances. I knew I was looking at a hero.
Yeah, that's what I've always said, too. And then suddenly he's in the school book depository building that's right on the president's route. So, what are the odds of that,
Yeah, but he was maneuvered and manipulated.
Right.
And, I met him in April. I knew him April, May, June, July, August, September. And then in October and November, we were separated, but we were still connected by telephone. And last time I talked to him was only 37 and a half hours before the assassination. So through David Vary and others, he had managed to penetrate a ring of assassins. And we now know that they lured him in so that they could blame him alone. He tried to stop it. I told Jim Mars in 1999 that Lee had joined an abort team. When I told him that, that man sat up and he said, "What?" He said, "Nobody knows about this abort team." He rattled off some names. He said, "Do you recognize any of these names?" And I said, "Yes, I recognize Plumlee." He said, "That's Robert Tosh Plumlee, CIA pilot. He was the one who told me about this group, it's a abort team." He said, "Nobody knows about this, and yet you do." He was really amazed. This is one reason that Jim Mars wrote the afterword in my book, Me and Lee. In there you can read why he believed me. God bless him. He's gone now. I miss him very much.
Well, what about the Frank Fiorini?
Frank?
Yeah.
Well, he's peripheral to this. I mean, Frank Sturgis was he was a CIA asset. They used him and all that. Lee had met him, but in fact, his name is in Lee's address book.
Right.
That's Frank Sturgis.
Right.
And he was involved with Marita Lorenz, who was a mistress for a while of Castro. In fact, CIA tried to use her as well, gave her poison pills to give him. She hid them in her cold cream and they dissolved, so that was no good. So, I mean, there were many efforts to kill Castro.
Well, let me ask you this.
He was pretending to be pro-Castro so he could find Castro spies in New Orleans.
Now, you know about Sturgis because Lee mentioned it to you at the time or from going back and researching?
That's kind of a bad way to... here's the problem.
Okay.
The people that we knew had more names. For example, David... I could go to some of these, like David Lewis, who was Anna Lewis's husband. On the street, he was called Sam Spade. So for a long time, I didn't know some of these people by their only by their war names.
And so what was the story with Sturgis?
Well, I'm saying this. All I know is that Lee met him once in Florida. That's really all I know, because Lee told me he had made a trip to Florida. This came about when, as a matter of fact, when I was in the right there in the post office and handed that letter over, this is what made Lee think I was on the secret side already. Right. Not only speaking Russian, which these military officers paid for a course for me to do so I could translate Russian cancer research articles. But when I handed this letter over, because my husband didn't want his parents to know I was writing to him, he told me to put in the corner there that the letter was from R. Rourke. Okay, now that R that I wrote looked a lot, in cursive, it looked a lot like an A. Lee knew an Alexander Rourke, and he's thinking I'm mailing something for Alexander Rourke. And who am I mailing it to? Mr. Robert A. Baker at Eglin Air Force Base. Now, here's the thing. My fiance's name was Robert A. Baker. His parents were working on what's called Hurlburt Arms at Hurlburt Field, and they were stationed out at Eglin Air Force Base while they were working on this construction. Lee knew secret agent, FBI agent, Robert A. Baker at Eglin Air Force Base. So it looks to him like I'm mailing off a letter for Alex Rourke, who was a CIA pilot that he knew that was in Florida that he had met, to Robert A. Baker, FBI agent at Eglin Air Force Base. So right away, and that my speaking Russian and the fact that I mentioned that I knew Dr. Mary Sherman, he had already been apprised of Dr. Sherman, and he had been sent to New Orleans, and one of his projects was to protect the project that Sherman and Dr. Oxner were working on. Now, you know, Dr. Sherman, in the book Dr. Mary's Monkey, you learn that she was viciously murdered on July 21st, 1964, the same day the Warren Commission came to get testimonies. She was a brave woman, and she would have stepped forward and mentioned things that would have helped to exonerate Lee Oswald. So she ended up instead as front page news. And she was stabbed, she was burned, and her right arm was missing. I mean, nobody wanted to talk in New Orleans who knew a lot of the things that we were doing after that.
Yeah, I had Ed Haslund on the show too.
Well, then you won't know. Also, maybe Ed didn't tell you this, but that was in July. In June, Guy Bannister had been murdered. Oh, they said he died of a heart attack, but he had a bullet in his back, according to his mistress, and so on. And then you have the month before that, Hugh Ward, who was Bannister's business partner, a nice young pilot. I met him, a nice guy. He was blown up in a plane along with the former mayor, DeLesseps Morrison, who also knew about who Lee really was. So they got rid of 3 in 3 months in New Orleans. This was spread all around to people who knew about our project, knew about us, and everybody went silent. And as for me, David Vary called me and he said, if your name gets in the paper, your history, they will kill you. They're watching you. And I'd been sent back to Florida.
Did your name come up?
It was a hard time. I could not go to my sister's wedding. I didn't go to my grandparents' funeral, so my name wouldn't get in the paper. And as for poor David Vary, Dave, when in 1967 he escaped the first haul in of all the witnesses who got killed, but in 1967 on February 22nd, 5 days earlier, his name was in the paper. It was front page news as a getaway pilot for Lee Oswald. He called Garrison's office and said, I'm a dead man. 5 days later, he was dead, and they said it was of natural causes.
What about the Warren Commission? Did your name come up in the Warren Commission?
Well, no, but neither did David Vary's, right. Neither did Guy Bannister's, neither did Mary Sherman's, all kinds of people who were associated and close in the New Orleans project and whose name should have been there. We're all missing. Of course, they put in all kinds of people. There are many, many. If you look in the FBI files that they have in the Warren Commission's 26 volumes, they have interview after interview with people who say, gee, I never met him. Oh, I don't know who Oswald was. Over and over again, they just stuff it and pack it full of worthless interviews.
What about Marina? Was Marina aware of you?
Well, she must have been I know she called a restaurant where Thompson's restaurant where Lee and I met. We have a witness, Anna Lewis, that's on YouTube, for example, who knew about me and Lee because we double dated, she and David Lewis and I. David Lewis was working with Guy Bannister. That was the former head of the Chicago FBI, over 500 agents. He was in New Orleans. So, yeah, she had gone down to, like, Leon Israel Coffee Company, seeing if her husband was really working there. He gave her the fake he wasn't working there. He was working at Riley with me. He didn't want her to see me. See, she was suspicious. She called S.A. Thompson and said, is anybody there with my husband? And Anna answered, she said, I'm not allowed to talk about people who come in here, you know. Even though that was true, that she probably suspected anything, she really, she was isolated. People are saying, oh, how mean he was, not let her learn English and isolate her. But it protected her. If she had learned English and got out in society, the USSR, if she ever went back, they would have executed her. Because after Lee was arrested and then killed, if Marina had ever gone back, they would have killed her because for living with someone who killed the president, as it was put. But you see, in America, she would have been put in prison or something if she'd known English and everything else. As it was, the CIA, the FBI could do nothing with her because she'd been isolated. She knew no English. She was not a spy for the U.S., and they couldn't pin it on her. So that saved her and protected her.
What about Lee and Marina, their landlady? What do you know about her?
Which one? They moved several times.
Oh, really? Well, there was one, though, that many speculate was some kind of an agent.
Well, let's put it this way. The last place they lived, 4905 Magazine Street, was actually owned by, at the time, had just been sold from someone who was the anti-Castro movement, and you have a lot of that going on. The landlady that was on the property, Mrs. Garner, was just a manager there. Now, Lee did hire Mr. Eric Rogers and his wife to move into 4907. His mail did not come to 4905, where his wife and little girl were, his pregnant wife. he had the mail come next door. Instead of to 4905, it went to 4907. Even Marina wrote her letters there. And Mr. Rogers would pick up the mail there and pass it on. And I'm talking about subversive mail and everything. But Lee was paying their electric bill and their gas bill and everything in exchange for this. It's interesting that when Lee left New Orleans, the FBI, CIA, reported that he was a deadbeat because this man who lived at 4905 had not paid the utilities bill for September at 4907. So we've got all this. They knew darn well he was living at 4905, but they wanted to make him look like a deadbeat. Oh, look, he didn't pay his bill. Recently, an article came out from the Dallas Morning News. They always do this, trying to find something to lay on Lee Oswald to show what a bad person he was. In this case, they wrote an entire newspaper article that he had actually been late in handing in one of his library books. I mean, this is how ridiculous they get.
And he worked at a book depository. You think you could have handed it over there? Let me ask you a question now. What about Lee's mother? Now, she always said he was some kind of an agent. Did you ever meet his mother or converse with her?
No, but boy, did I learn a lot about her. Lee and I had a lot in common. Besides, we didn't drink or smoke or any of that. But, for example, my mother was, oh my gosh, we both had mothers that were very similar, very bossy and dressed well and everything like that, but were very neglectful of us. And, I mean, we could compare mothers. And Marguerite oh, brother. Look, for example, when he was growing up, he was not allowed a key to the house. He had to sit outside till his mom got home. Not allowed in his own house because she wants to keep it perfect. And the days that she would leave, when he did get in, often she didn't have any dinner for him. And he told me he had to make ketchup soup for himself. He had ketchup soup and bread for dinner. It was that kind of life for him sometimes. She was neglectful, and she was so anxious to get him out of the house and into the Marines. When he was only 16, she faked a birth certificate so he could get in the Marines. It didn't work because he wasn't tall enough or anything. You could tell he wasn't 17. A few days after he was 17, he did join the Marines, and he loved it. And he was one of ours. That's the thing. He had to be dirtied up in the end and pretend he didn't like the Marines. He had to get court-martialed behind the scenes. That all of this was just to make him so that when he went to the Soviet Union, if he'd gone with a perfect record from the Marines, they would have executed him. But with looking like a dissident and someone who didn't like the Marines and hated the Marines and so on, he was able to enter the Soviet Union and was believed.
But his mother said that she used to speculate that he was some kind of an agent.
Well, she caused him a lot of trouble that way. She noticed some things. For example, she knew that someone came to their house and tried to recruit Lee early on. She also, and I really have to respect her for this, as I said, how can you come back from the Soviet Union after 30 months there, renouncing your citizenship and everything? She knew that was impossible. He shouldn't be walking the streets. She knew that her son was very special, but she had a couple of screws loose. I mean, she said if he had been ordered to kill the president, then he did his patriotic duty. I mean, come on. Talk about way out thinking, Well,
let me ask you, we're about to take a commercial break, but
yes.
The CIA docs that are coming out today, do you think you're going to be mentioning them?
Well, here's the thing is I show people, now remember, people who come, JFK, DallasConference.com, you come on the 17th, 18th, 19th, you're going to hear 31 speakers, you're going to hear all about all this, and you're going to find anything about me in the record. I will show you my birth certificate, say wipe my name off my birth certificates. Even last year I tried to get one, and I can't. I can't get my own birth certificate. It's like I don't exist. I show them how my records were changed. I invented a new way, as I told you, to get magnesium out of seawater, for heaven's sakes. And according to them, all I took was one course in chemistry and got a D in it, even though I have records that I worked for Peninsular Chem Research on cutting-edge chemical research in 1963 in the fall. And they just wiped me out. So the answer is I'm not going to be in the record, I suppose, because I can't even get my own records.
Okay, and you said you can't get a copy of your own birth certificate. What about your Social Security number?
Well, I've got a Social Security number.
It's the same one you've always had?
I got that Social Security number in New Orleans, by the way.
Okay.
Before that, I didn't have one. There are lots of documents. I can show them to people. I have, by the way, I finished a New Orleans tour where a lot of people have photographed them and everything because we need witnesses to this. There are other people who have never been mentioned as if they didn't exist. I'm not the only one. For example, Dr. Mary Sherman should have been mentioned. Dr. Oxner should have been. When Garrison did his investigation, you'll notice that, or you could, in Dr. Oxner's own official biography, Surgeon of the South, he says that Garrison wanted to indict him as a conspirator against Kennedy, and he should have been, as a matter of fact.
But real quick, because we're about to take a break, you say you can't get a hold of your birth certificate, but your Social Security number, have you ever run your own credit reports and taken a look at what's on there?
Yeah, we've tried to. There's nothing on me on credit. There's absolutely nothing for me on the credit report. It's zero, blank. I'm not kidding.
Okay. No.
I recently tried to get something, and they ran a credit report, and they couldn't find me. Couldn't find my name or anything. I have no credit or anything.
When's the last time you applied for credit?
I've tried to. I've been in exile since 2003 with death threats. I have stayed.
Okay.
Actually, in different places in Europe, people have protected me because I ended up in the hospital 5 times in 4 years after I spoke out. I even applied for political asylum in Sweden. They couldn't take me because I was from the land of the free and the home of the brave. But they do allow me to use fake names there. And then every 90 days I have to move. I have been moving every 90 days in and out of the EU for the past, 13 years now.
And then how do you support yourself now? Just from the conferences and the books?
Well, it has not been easy, sir.
Because
I don't own anything. Nobody can sue me. I mean, I'm going to be speaking out against some living people at this new conference coming up. Who's going to sue me? They can't sue me because I don't own anything. I had a good career teaching at universities. I lost everything when I spoke out, and my health and my eyesight. I could go on and on. Recently, 125 people got together to restore the vision in my left eye. I'm so grateful. A lot of people helped. Little donations.
That glitch. We were off there for a couple of seconds.
Let's try that again. Well, you think that's something? The person I talked to just before you, the last time we talked, the internet was out at the hotel I was in for 4 whole days, and he's a witness to that. They never saw anything like that before. This just happens. Let's try it again. Judith Baker, Facebook. You hear it, folks?
It's amazing because people are going to think I was fooling around and I hit the mute button. I'm telling you, the internet went off just as she was giving that, saying about how they... I had a
terrible internet attack just before we got together. I had to go downstairs and we had to technically get it fixed. The internet was attacked here at this hotel.
Let's take a little commercial break. We'll be back with more of Judyth Vary Baker. She's going to be at this conference, jfkdallasconference.com. That's November 17th, 18th, and 19th at the Crown Plaza Hotel. How many speakers? 30 speakers, you said?
31.
31.
And I founded that conference 5 years ago.
And is that the one you do with Chris Milligan? No.
Well, Chris is there, but I'm the sole founder and supporter of it. God bless everybody who comes. And we have it at the lowest price. As I say, it's my book sales that hold that together because it costs a lot of money. It's a big conference. It's the biggest one now in the world for the JFK assassination matter.
And the books are Me and Lee. Another one is David Ferry, Mafia Pilot. And another one is Kennedy and Oswald, The Big Picture. We'll be right back with more of Judyth Vary Baker, if they allow us to come back. After these messages here. I'll be right back in a minute. And now a word from our sponsors. Archival Revival, the Christian Film Archive, is currently paying for vintage Christian films. They are dedicated to preserving and restoring classic Christian films and media. So if you have an original prints, negatives, or other film elements of classic Christian films, or you have audio recording masters for classic Christian record albums, they want to buy them from you. So email archival.revival@gmail.com, and they're going to make you an offer. Archival Revival wants to preserve these classic Christian films so that they continue saving people for years. These films have brought people to salvation. They want to continue that. Their staff has decades of experience in handling and preserving of film elements, and they utilize the very best climate-controlled film storage facilities around the world. Contact them today at archival.revival@gmail.com. If there's someone you know has these prints, negatives, recording masters, or other materials from vintage Christian films, you can check out their blog at archivalrevival.blogspot.com. Now, just so you understand, Archival Revival wants to pay you for these films. So you can look in your church attic, in the church basement. If you have a friend who runs a Christian youth ministry or these youth vacation Bible study camps, they have these old films in those big metal containers, 16 millimeter and 35 millimeter. Archival Revival wants to buy them from you. So this is a sponsor that actually wants to give you money. And all you have to do is contact them, tell them what you have. If you're in the UK or Ireland or Africa, these films are all over the world, and they're gathering dust, and they're going to deteriorate if they don't get into the hands of Archival Revival. So that's archival.revival@gmail.com, or the blog spot is archivalrevival.blogspot.com. Don't forget, this show is brought to you by pscoco.com. Phoebe Sod is an independent curator with the Cocoa Exchange. The Cocoa Exchange is formerly known as Dove Chocolate Discoveries, and they make the finest silky smooth chocolate because the products start with the best cocoa beans, which are tested for quality and flavor by expert technicians. The Cocoa Exchange offers not just premium chocolates, but anything from sauces and spices to brownie and cake mixes, and even coffee and martini mixes. If you wish to treat yourself or someone you love to a sweet and tasty gift, then the Cocoa Exchange is the brand for you. So you go to pscoco.com, you click on the Shop Now button, you can see all their beautiful chocolates. You can order it right now tonight. It could be in your mailbox in a couple of days. Or if you want to get into the chocolate business, you want to be a chocolatier just like Phoebe Sod, you can click the Contact Us button, and you can learn how to get your own website, go into the cocoa chocolate business, and sell chocolate and make a little bit of money there. Remember, all these shows on Awake are brought to you by emailrevealer.com. You can go to emailrevealer.com and get a copy of my book, How to Become a Successful Private Investigator. But you also do all the kind of different services for you. An online dating service investigation. It's called an online infidelity investigation. And that's where you give us your husband or your boyfriend, your girlfriend's email address, and we trace it back to their online dating websites. And we return a list of all the dating sites that email is registered to. We can expand on that investigation and trace it back to porn sites, escort service sites, swinger sites, even gambling websites, and even prescription drug websites. If you think your ex-husband or something is addicted to prescription medication or involved in a extreme online pornography addiction, we can produce a report for you that you can use in court. Adoption investigations. If you want to locate your birth parents or your birth child you gave away for adoption, we can do adoption investigations for you. Asset searches for you. Locate bank accounts, hidden assets, hidden properties, hidden income, all different kinds of services in the asset search investigation. Email tracing. If you need to locate or identify somebody from just an email address, we can do an email trace investigation for you, and all kinds of digital forensics, computer and cell phone digital forensics, where we can recover deleted content from an email or a hard drive and produce a report for you that you can use in court. That's emailrevealer.com, or you can contact me at oppermaninvestigations@gmail.com. Welcome back to the Opperman Report. I'm your host, Private Investigator Ed Opperman. We're here today with Judyth Vary Baker, author of 3 books about the girlfriend of ex-girlfriend of Lee Harvey Oswald, Me and Lee, David Ferrie, Mafia Pilot, and Kennedy and Oswald, The Big Picture. That one's coming out soon. Judith, at this conference, November 17th to 18th to 19th, how much are the tickets for that?
Well, they're as low as we can get them. I mean, I'll put it this way, 31 or 32 speakers. It's $100 for all 3 days.
Okay, yeah, that is very reasonable, yeah. And it's a Crown Plaza hotel. You got to deal with the hotel, too, for people to get a discount?
Yes, we have a group thing. If they go to, again, jfkdallasconference.com, they'll see a tab for hotel. We're running out of, I have to tell you, this sold out last year. You better hurry to get hotel tickets because they're a lot more expensive around us. They're $129 there, and I want to tell you, you can't find it anywhere else during convention week in Dallas for that kind of price anywhere else in a decent hotel near Dealey Plaza and where everything's happening.
Now, you haven't mentioned on the air. We talked about it off the air, but can you give us some of the speakers that you're proud of having there?
Well, for example, the House Committee, Special Committee on Assassinations, HSCA, they convened after the Warren Commission because so many people had problems with the Warren Commission. They realized that those 26 volumes were really padded with a lot of junk. A lot of people were never mentioned that should have been. So they opened up a new inquiry a few years later. And at that time, there was a Dictabelt recording that came out. And they ascertained that indeed there was another shooter. It had to be from the Grassy Knoll. People who only cite the Warren Commission, which I ought to call the Warren Omission. Oh, by the way, there's a litmus test that everybody listening to us should hear and understand. If you wonder who's giving you fake news or who you can trust, it doesn't take that long to find out the truth about Lee Oswald. Just look up that there were 2 rifles, not just one, involved that they say were the murder weapon. If that reporter simply says that Lee Oswald shot Kennedy, that's the litmus test. You don't have to trust them on anything. Absolutely, because they have not done their homework or their purchased voice. Don't trust them if they say that Lee Oswald killed Kennedy. Easy as that to find out who's telling you the truth.
And you were going to give us a list of names of people that are speaking?
Yes. Yes. For example, on the HSCA, we have, for example, Robert Tannenbaum, who resigned from the HSCA because they absolutely refused to look at certain portions of evidence. For example, Robert Tannenbaum saw a training film with Lee Oswald in it. He was helping to train the anti-Castro Cubans. That film has disappeared. But interestingly enough, I'm one of the witnesses. It came out in 1999 and said I had also seen that film. And on top of that, there's a Mr. Bishop, who was a mercenary who also is on record. So only the 3 of us have seen that film. It's been probably destroyed like so many other things. He is coming, and he's a very honest man. He's a very well-known author, and along with him will be Robert Groden. Robert Groden, of course, wrote The Search for Lee Harvey Oswald. He was on the HSCA as well as a photo expert. And then we're also having Dr. Cyril Wecht. Dr. Cyril Wecht is the most famous pathologist and coroner in the United States history. And he's often on TV and everything. But he was on that committee. He was only one of 4 doctors were asked to analyze the magic bullet. He was the only one who had the guts to say this is impossible. You cannot have a bullet go straight through somebody's neck bone and come out on the other side, for example, as they had it. Gerald Ford, became president, and he was rewarded for moving the bullet hole in Kennedy's back up into the neck. He said he did it for the security of the country, national security reasons. He said so on his deathbed. And we have others coming in that are being brought in. Gordon Ferry. We have, I can give you the whole list. It's take me just a moment and I can do that, matter of fact. The point is that nobody else has done this. I'm going to give you the list right now.
Who's Gordon Ferry? David Ferry's brother?
No, Gordon Ferry actually knew the Kennedys personally, and he worked with especially Jackie Kennedy. He knew, for example, that Jackie wanted to kill herself after It's just so sad.
Oh, yeah, okay. I think I recall Gordon Ferry now. And let me ask a quick, while you're looking for that, she's on jfkdallasconference.com. You can go there and find the rest of the speakers. What can you tell us about Lee's trip to Mexico?
Well, here's the thing. Lee was originally just supposed to courier in. He had been taught how to keep this biological weapon alive. It's a cancer, vigorous and dangerous cancer. Now, they had that 50 years ago. Imagine what they have now. But at any rate, he was only supposed to hand this off to a contact. The contact didn't show up. We now believe that Lee was they never intended him to let this material get into the hands of the Cubans. We believe they used him, duped him to have him go down there so that he would be visible and present while they framed him there by having imposters trying proposing as him. For example, the History Channel recently is using an old ploy that the CIA itself discarded in 1964 as not true and too dangerous to use. That is that Lee Oswald was working with the Russians and with the Cubans to kill Kennedy. At that time, it would cause World War III. Now, 50 years more have passed, plus a few years. So now they're exhuming this old discarded theory and calling it new. The man doing it is Bob Bauer. He is their independent investigator, but he is, of course, a career agent with the CIA. He gets his retirement checks from the CIA, and the last thing you're going to hear from him is that the CIA made a stooge out of Lee Oswald there in Mexico City, which is exactly what they did. They claim that Lee Oswald met Kostakov, the assassin, the KGB assassin, when he went to get his visa for the USSR, because Lee had, he and his wife could never visit the USSR again without a visa. Let's just make it simple like that. He was married to a Russian wife. Did you know that anybody who wanted to get a visa from Russia who was in Mexico City had to go to Kostakov or to his assistant if he wasn't there? Only two people. So they're saying, oh, look, Oswald visited Kostakov, the assassin. Therefore, he's plotting against Kennedy. The last thing Khrushchev wanted was to hurt Kennedy. Kennedy had stopped a war, a full-blown nuclear war between the Soviet Union and the United States. I mean, it was only Kennedy standing there. Look at the film 13 Days, which is based on all the records. I have the list now of people. It's really a great list. I'd love to read it to you.
Go ahead.
We've got John B. Wells. We've got my co-author, Edward Schwartz. We have Paul Kunstler. He had put in a New York Times ad that was so expensive, it took up an entire page. And you know something about this ad? It was censored, even though he paid a fortune for it. He's going to talk about that. Zach Shelton is a retired FBI officer that we trust because he tried to actually save some files. In fact, he's talking about those files and also be talking about James Files, who claims he shot at Kennedy on the grassy knoll. Shelton will tell you what he thinks of that because he's interviewed him and researched him for decades now, 2 decades. We've got James Dolan. His dad was a notorious Dallas hoodlum, so you can see what people were doing there. Edgar Tatro is coming. He has been on The Men Who Killed Kennedy, and he has explosive new news. Phil Nelson is coming. He's the one that wrote the book about LBJ and showed that LBJ lets Lyndon Johnson has to take a lot of responsibility for the Kennedy assassination. Dr. Jim Fetzer will be there with a list of the most important books people should have on the Kennedy assassination and why. We're going to have John Barber. We're going to have his movie.
Oh, John Barber. Yeah, John Barber's on one of my stations. I play him every Saturday night.
Isn't he wonderful?
Yeah.
Yes.
I play him on Wake Radio. You can listen to him every Saturday night. There you go.
We're going to have David Denton coming in. He's in charge of the JFK research group. He's going to be doing work for us about the secret records of July and October surprises. Larry Schnapf is coming. This man is incredible. He is a wonderful lawyer. He's going to be reporting on the Houston mock trial of Lee Harvey Oswald, that's going to be held the day before our meeting in Dallas. So they're going to come personally to our and tell us what happened at the mock trial in Houston. With him will be Randolph Benson with film clips. Now, Randolph Benson also did The Searchers, and we're going to have his film, and he's personally going to show us extra clips from that. Andrew Craig is the most honest journalist we have in Washington, D.C. He's coming. He's going to connect the dots, tell us about RFK and MLK. I'll be speaking, and I have received threats because I am speaking about Ruth and Michael Payne. If you look way back in the history, Ruth Payne kept Marina Oswald and Lee's daughter Judy at her house because Lee wasn't living with them anymore. You know, we fell in love and all that, and he was in no hurry to have her move back in with him. At any rate, we have found out information about the Paynes. They're still alive that I think should put them in prison. They can go ahead and people can threaten me if they want, but I tell you the truth, and that's what I have to do. Of course, there's Robert Groden, Cyril Wecht, Robert Tannenbaum. We've already talked about. Dick Russell is coming. This is the man who wrote The Man Who Knew Too Much. He's going to be talking about the government's lies about the Kennedy assassination and Kennedy's vision of a nuclear-free world. We're going to have a wonderful speaker's dinner and with some awards. One of the awards we handed out last year was Gerald Posner. He got the Down the Toilet Award. This year, the History Channel is going to get the Down the Toilet Award.
Well, you know what? You got to remember the History Channel is owned by Rupert Murdoch, okay? Anything on the History Channel is not, they're not doing us any favors at the History Channel, okay?
Well, I have to call it the Unhistory Channel. We're going to have Victoria Salzer Hawes. She's a New Orleans witness who saw Lee Oswald at Dr. Mary Sherman's apartments, and he came to her. I mean, of all the places in New Orleans, I said that Lee Oswald was going there all the time, and she confirms that. We have other witnesses have come forth, too. We're going to have Edward T. Haslam, of course, who Dr. Mary's monkey. Grover Proctor is coming in. This is a professor. He's fabulous. It's about the Raleigh call, Lee Oswald's emergency call to the CIA that he made. They pulled the plug on that call so he couldn't get through to a CIA cutout who could have helped him. Gordon Ferry. Richard Charnon is going to also be speaking by Skype because of his medical conditions, but he's the one that's written some wonderful books showing how the elections have been rigged. And he's a statistician with 4 degrees in mathematics. He'll be speaking about the suspicious and untimely deaths in the Kennedy and King assassinations. We're going to have St. John Hunt. He is the son of E. Howard Hunt of the Watergate thing and who was involved with Kennedy assassination. I love him like a son. He's coming.
I've had him on the show a few times. We're running out of time.
Anyway, there are many more. You get the idea.
Yeah, we're running out of time. So I wanted to ask you, what do you know about General Walker?
Okay, this is really interesting because everything's messed up. How much time do we have? How much time do I have?
Well, we got 7 minutes left.
All right, I'll try to go quickly on this because it's important and people need to know. There is a note out there. It's undated. The note says, Marina, basically, if anything happens to me, here's what you need to do because I can be arrested or shot or killed. And Ruth Payne conveniently supplied this note to the Warren Commission, all right? That note was, they said it had to do with the Walker shooting that Lee Oswald was involved in. Here's the thing. Marina Oswald, remember, had a nursing baby, only 5 weeks old when Kennedy was shot, and Lee was arrested, and he was killed on the 24th, 47 and a half hours after he was in custody. He was shot dead in front of 70 Dallas police. They did not want him to live, I'll tell you that. Now, here is Marina. She's alone in the world. They sequester her. They get her to say what they want. She even later said they would have deported me if I had cooperated with them. One of the things that Marina told them is that her husband Lee went out there and planned to shoot Nixon. Well, they didn't accept that because Nixon was nowhere in town, and they realized that was a lie when she said that she had locked Lee Oswald in the bathroom. They had to remind her there aren't locks on the outside of bathroom doors, okay? So there are many, many lies that Marina made, and one of them, under pressure, was that Lee shot at General Walker. Now, General Walker himself got mad at the HSCA that we've been talking about because they put 2 bullets up there. They put one that was the magic bullet next to it, also a copper-clad bullet. They said that came from the Walker shoot. Walker wrote to them himself. The general said, that is not the bullet I picked up that was shot at me. The bullet that he picked up was clad with steel. It was a steel-clad bullet, and this was a copper-clad. So he said, you have put in a fake piece of evidence. That's what they did. They put all kinds of fake evidence in. Anyway, this note said that Lee wrote to her because of this. He was ordered to put a Viva Castro placard around his neck, stand there in Dallas only a few days after the Walker shooting, and he was ordered to hand out FPCC, that is Fair Play for Cuba, pro-Castro pamphlets. Lee told me that he was afraid they would shoot him or they'd arrest him. This is the reason for that note. It had nothing to do with General Walker. General Walker was, here's another thing. Why would Lee Oswald shoot at General Walker, who was Kennedy's dire enemy, and then go and shoot Kennedy? You see how silly and ridiculous this is.
Do you think Walker shot at himself?
No, I think his boyfriend shot. He was a homosexual. I think his boyfriend shot at him through there, and got away in a car. There were 2 cars that took off. Marina said another thing. She said that he buried the rifle. Well, you can't do that to a rifle, especially in Dallas, all that clay and everything around, to hide it. And that he came home on a bus. There were no buses running that late. I lived in Dallas.
You mentioned Walker was homosexual, which he was. He was busted in a men's room.
Yeah.
Right. How come so many people involved with the JFK assassination are homosexual?
Well, I'll tell you about that, because Lee and I discussed that. Everywhere we turned, there seemed to be, here's the thing. Yeah. There were a lot of closet homosexuals at the time they couldn't tell, and a lot of them got involved in politics, okay? Because some of them were like Walker, were in positions of power and everything. It was important that nobody knew their true position. Trouble is, that meant that they were very vulnerable to blackmail, and therefore they could be used, you see, as witnesses when they were false witnesses. That's really the bottom line of this. And of course, like David Ferry was a homosexual. Because of that, he was able to interview a lot of people who were involved. Some of these, congressmen and so on, were very debauched. I mean, they'd sleep with women, men, you name it. I mean, look what we have going on today. Yeah. These power-hungry people, sometimes their appetites just go right out of line, and that was going on back then, too. It just wasn't known.
Judith, thank you so much. I got to have you back, when you're not so busy, I'd really like to do a couple more hours with you.
Really, because this is the key. You see, you look at the template. I call it the template of evil, and see what they did to Lee and how they hide things. And they use the same modus operandi today. Why not? It works. So you're going to see false flags. Kennedy was against those false flags things. His friend, Senator Smathers, said, let's go ahead and bomb our boys over at Guantanamo. They have an aircraft carrier there. We'll only lose a few hundred of them, but then that'll give us a chance to invade Cuba. All we have to do is put, the names put Cuban insignia on some planes, and let's just go ahead and bomb our boys. Kennedy smashed a plate. He was so angry. See, he wouldn't go along with all this. There was so much that Kennedy, you see, thought he was a real president.
Yeah, I actually had a guest on my show who was the guy who obtained those FOIA Operation Northwoods documents.
Yes, it's Operation Northwood. That's right.
Yeah, we know about that. Yeah, I had the guy on the show. Judith, we're out of time, but thank you so much. We have to. I tried to get a hold of you a couple of years ago. And you were all.
Well, go ahead and contact Julia. You know where she is now, and I will be available. I'm going to be through December. After December 1st, I have to actually go find a place where people won't know where I am, because it gets harder and harder. I start getting followed. I turn around and take their picture and things like that real fast. So it isn't as bad as it used to be. And some of our enemies have died. That has helped me a lot recently.
I'll try and book you before the conference. We'll do another hour. So thank you so much.
That's terrific.
Judith Vary Baker. God bless you, hon.
God bless all of you. Thank you.
Thank you. Good night. All right, guys, if you like that, don't forget the members section. I got to squeeze that in, right? Opperman Report at gmail.com. I'll hook you up with a deal. Or you go to oppermanreport.com. Really, this month, we need to raise funds really desperately this month, because the Awake, most things are covered, because we did get a lot of donations and memberships since I did the show this week. But the Awake yearly hosting and the domain name is pretty much the only thing that's still left to be paid. Thank you so much, guys. Judith Vary Baker. I enjoyed that one. I thought I